So welcome back friends. Today we will learn about JRE, how does the JVM work and also about JRE and JDK. So let's start with the definition. So JDK contains JRE plus other build tools. So JRE is Java runtime environment. So all the necessary tools required to run Java constitute the JRE, Java runtime environment. Okay, so it contains a Java file and other libraries and some other things. Okay, so this is required to run Java applications on your machine. So this constitutes JRE, and the build tools which are there, it contains javac. Javac is required to compile your code. Okay, and other many other tools. Okay, so all these tools are required to build the code into the runtime environment. Okay, so Java, this is required to execute the code, this is required to compile the code. Okay, and JVM is an instance of JRE, means the JRE files loaded into the memory so that they can do their job. When it is loaded into memory and functional, everything is ready, this constitutes a Java virtual machine. Okay, like we have class and we have objects, so object is instance of that class. Similarly, JVM is the instance of the JRE. Okay, so whenever we compile any class into using the JDK, so we get the MyClass. For example, we have MyClass.java file and we compile it. Okay, so what we will get? We will get MyClass.class file. So this class file is platform independent. So which means that if you compile this MyClass.java on a Windows machine to MyClass.class file, and then you transfer this class file to a Linux machine and you run, in that case also it will work fine. Why? Because this JVM, the JVM has something which is called class loaders. Okay, these class loaders will read this .class file and compile it into machine code according to the machine. So if it is a Windows machine, it will create the machine code according to Windows. If it is Linux, then Linux. If it is Mac, then it will do according to Mac. So JVM does this job. And what inside the JVM? There are class loaders inside the JVM that do this job. So there are three types of class loaders. The first is bootstrap class loader. So this bootstrap class loader loads the core Java libraries into the memory. Okay, then we have extension class loader. So in Java we have an ext directory in the Java JDK setup. So if you place any classes or jars inside that ext directory, it will load those files into the memory. This will load the core classes into the memory. This will load the ext files into the library. And then there is application class loader. It will load classes of the programs that you have written. If you have written a runnable jar in the previous chapter we saw, so it will load that all the classes inside that runnable jar. If you have written a simple Java class, it will load that Java class into the memory. So this will load our classes into the memory. Okay, so these are three type of class loaders. So apart from loading the class into the memory, the JVM also does the verification of the bytecode. So before loading the class into the memory, it verifies the bytecode for us. So it checks if no illegal memory access is present in the code. It also checks if there are cases of stack overflows or underflows, and it also checks for some usage of proper use of variable types. So after the verification is done, inside the JVM there is an execution engine. So the execution engine consists of three parts. The first is the interpreter. So this interpreter interprets the bytecode line by line. Okay, it is a slow process, but it helps in when we are debugging the code. But then we have the JIT compiler. So the JIT compiler basically compiles the .class file into machine code. So .class file is called bytecode. Okay, so it translates the .class file into machine code, and it doesn't do it for all the files, but it makes a judgment of the frequently used class files, .class file into machine code. And one important function it has, it is the garbage collector. So this garbage collector, whenever your Java application is running, the many objects are getting created. So it continues to check which objects are unreferenced right now. Means no part of the code is referencing them. So it will take those objects and kill them, destroy them, and save the memory for us. So the garbage collector is continuously running, looking for eligible objects for garbage collection, and continue to kill them or remove them from memory, so as to continuously manage the Java memory. Clear? So when we start a Java application, what happens is, if you don't specify how much memory it should initially start with, the default value is 512 MB. Okay, so suppose we don't specify any other value, so it will start with this much memory it will require on your RAM, active memory. Okay, so it has many things inside this. The first is method area. So this method area stores your class metadata, so some data about your class. Static variables, we learned about static variable. If you have forgotten, please refer the previous chapter. Okay, and your method codes. Now this is less significant part of the memory. Okay, but the important part here is, whatever objects you will create in Java, all of them will be created on the heap. Okay, so this occupies the significant part of your Java memory. Okay, and garbage collector generally clears this area only, and if the heap gets full, your Java application will certainly get hanged or crashed. It will not be able to function. So the garbage collector continuously monitors it for eligible objects and continuously tries to clear the heap as fast as it can. And then there are stacks. Okay, so there are more than one stacks in your Java application. So whatever, suppose your code calls method 1 calls method 2, method 2 calls method 3, method 3 calls 4, 5, 6. So all these method calls are stacked on top of each other. The last one will get called first, and continuously it will execute to the initial calling method. Okay, so all this will happen for once, means every thread will have its own stack. There are more than one threads running or more than one stacks running when we run our Java application. Okay, so this is stack. So it contains it contains reference to our method calls, and it contains references to our objects. All the objects are created by the stack on the heap, and they continue to refer them. And if you remove this reference, then this object becomes eligible for garbage collection. Okay, so then there is a small part which is program counter. So basically it tracks the address of the currently executing instruction. Address currently executing instructions. And then there is native memory stack. You must not be know, but we can execute C++ code in Java as well, and some other language code in Java as well. So this is done using the native memory or the native API in Java. So all the calls to native code, by native we mean other language code. Generally it is C++ code. So it contains all the calls that are being made to the native code. Okay, so these are the 5 key components of Java memory. There are other small components as well, but for generally you only need to know this much. So when this garbage collector runs in Java, it has many algorithms to collect the eligible objects and destroy them. Okay. So the common algorithms are mark and sweep and generational garbage collection. Okay, these are the two most common algorithms that are used for collecting eligible objects. We don't need to go into details of these algorithms. And you know, this heap is also divided into two small other sections. We can say one is the young generation and the other is the old generation. So this generational garbage collector tries to clean generation by generation. First it will try to clean young generation and then it will try to clean old generation. Basically the objects which have been recently created are put in the young generation, and if they are not garbage collected for some time, they get transferred to the old generation. Okay, so this garbage collection cycle first tries to clean up the eligible young generation objects, then it focuses on the old generation objects. Okay, this way this algorithm works. So friends, in this chapter we learn some theoretical things which a Java developer should know. It is not that if you don't know these things you will not be able to write Java programs or run Java applications, but if you want to become a good developer, you should know them. So we have talked about these things briefly, and now in the next section we will talk about other things.